Hey guys, so we've all been there. As any experienced engineer knows, it is extremely hard to get estimates right. As we all know, it's extremely hard to estimate when we will actually get things done. Estimating, as you may be well aware, is one of the most difficult things a human can do. The main reason for this is because we have a tendency to always assume best case scenario, even when there's a lot of evidence stating otherwise. The only way to really circumvent and solve this problem is to use this technique called pre-mortem analysis. Now, this technique comes from a pretty well-known book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Now, the major goal of the technique is to get around the best case assumptions that we all as humans tend to make. Now, these assumptions are very useful. If we always thought of every project as how it could go wrong, we may never start. However, that is the only way to realistically provide good estimates. So therefore, we're going to use the pre-mortem estimate technique to get around that. And what this technique very simply states is that let's assume we're a month out from whenever this project was supposed to get done. Now tell me everything that you think possibly could have gone wrong. And that's it. It forces us out of this best case assumption mindset and forces us to really think about all the various components and subsystems of what we need to build. And every one of those that could potentially fail, or there's a certain bit of ambiguity that has not been addressed yet. And let's assume the worst case scenario in each one of those instances. So then we can take our best case scenario and then our worst case scenario timelines and kind of average them out. Now, I know what you're thinking. This may be a lot of work, and especially product managers, business stakeholders, they certainly don't want to hear about pre-mortems and worst case, best case scenarios when they simply want what they think will be your estimate for a task. And so that's where Claude comes in. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use a Claude Code skill that I created called the pre-mortem estimator. I put together some slides to help us kind of walk through the content in a structured manner. Nevertheless, like I said before, we as humans are just terrible at estimating. Very well known, very well documented fallacy. So my solution is estimate.md. It's a Claude Code / command that adopts the persona of a senior technical lead and applies pre-mortem analysis to generate realistic timelines for any feature. And you can see example usage right there. Simply /estimate and then a string describing your problem, and that's it. So it's a 3-step process. It takes your entered in feature request, breaks it down. Now each one of these components, it assumes something went wrong, worst case scenario. And then it just simply aggregates each one of these worst case scenario timelines and sums them up together. And that's your estimate. So we break tasks down to the different structures. Your UI, UX implementation, state management, database, testing, QA, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let's say we were working on a particular kind of feature. Let's say we're working on push notifications in particular. The UI, UX would obviously be the little dialogue that comes up on the screen. The API integration would be whatever mechanisms are needed to communicate with Firebase, cloud messaging, and Apple's push network, and then any state management, and obviously any automated test as well as manual testing. Now, we want to imagine this task took way longer than we initially anticipated. Let's say that we were getting a bunch of random failures from Apple push network services for whatever reason, because we didn't properly deregister users whenever they logged out of a device and then logged in with a different account. Things of that nature. Things that are very hard to come up with on the fly when you're talking to product managers. So any number of things can go wrong: platform bugs, race conditions, scope creep, et cetera, et cetera. And then so this is what we finally get at the end of all this analysis. You get your optimistic timeline, the timeline you most likely would have come up with without doing this real breakdown. You get your pessimistic timeline. This is if everything went wrong. Usually it doesn't happen, but it can happen. And if it does, you give the optimistic timeline, but you really deliver in a pessimistic timeline, you're gonna have a hard day at work. And here you can see what we get back is the task broken down into its components. and then the analysis of each one. And you can see very simple skill definition. Please feel free to download and take it and modify it as you see fit. Why this works? This works because humans are bad at estimating, and it's very well known. Many, if not most projects are over budget, over the timeline, and some don't even work out. We need to start imagining failure as a certainty, not a probability, not something to be ignored and pushed to the side and hope it doesn't happen, but we anticipate it, expect it, and address it in our initial timelines and any updated timelines on top of that. We're obviously using AI to draw on broad engineering experience and just another person in the room, someone who isn't trying to please PMs and business stakeholders when they're talking to them right in that very moment. Someone who's just going to be based on the facts. So best practices: when to use the estimate.md. Use it for sprint planning, use it for feature proposals, stakeholder communication. Anytime you're doing solo dev work, keep yourself accountable. And certainly, anytime you're doing a task for the very first time, especially if it's large, just, get that second voice, get that second opinion in your head. Stop guessing, start estimate. Comment, like, subscribe.